Welcome, everybody, another podcast of Get Paid for Your Pad. And today I have a very special guest from Arlington, Vermont. Her name is Karen Chenile. I had to practice that surname a couple times to make sure I pronounce it correctly. And she is the founder of Stargazer Stays. She's been a student in our short-term rental profit academy for a while, a very appreciated member, and I'm excited to dive in and learn more about her business. So, Karen, welcome to the show.
I am so excited to be here. When I first got started in short-term rentals, I first read your book and then I found your podcast. So you are responsible for where I am today. I definitely would never have gotten as far into this if I hadn't found your show or your podcast. So you've been really instrumental in my success. And I always wanted to be on your podcast. It was one of the first things when I heard it, I was like, gosh, it would be so cool to be interviewed. And especially now as I've learned so much to be able to share all the different things I've learned and just stuff I've come across being a short-term rental operator.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that, and happy to help, of course. Stargazer Stays. That's a really cool name. Is there a lot of stargazing in where you are?
Actually, there is. So the name of my property here in Vermont is Stargazer Farm, and we named it that because in Vermont there's not a lot of light pollution. So when it's dark out on a clear night, the stars are beautiful. And so it was originally Stargazer Farm, and then we started doing an Airbnb inside the house here, and I just picked up Stargazer Stays. It kind of rolls off the tongue real nice, and it's memorable and easy to say, and it's a very easy URL to spell too.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing your brand, I already want to come over and stay with you.
It's absolutely beautiful here. Really, really pretty.
Yeah, and how many units do you have in total?
So it's funny that you asked that. So I have two in Biloxi, Mississippi. I have two in Vermont. There's three units in my house and two in Panama City Beach, Florida. So, and I also have two in Tennessee. I forgot about those almost. So I have 12, 11 in total.
Wow. So,
Yep.
did you, when you first started, was that your vision to build it out to a portfolio of 12 units and they're all in different places?
No, it wasn't. When I first started, I just wanted to use up this extra space I had in my house. Our house is 3,500 square feet. We had five bedrooms at the time, and all my kids had left. And we were trying to sell the house. And this is a pretty big house for Vermont. And the real estate market in Vermont's kind of flat. And it was on the market for a year, and nobody even really came to look at it. So I said to my husband, maybe we should try Airbnb just a couple of the rooms. And we loved it. We loved meeting the people. We loved the Airbnb model. So that's how we got started. And then it was kind of funny. I said, well, we're making really good money doing this. Let's go buy a condo near one of the ski resorts here in Vermont. So that was our next thing was in about 2000 we started in a house in 2016 in December of 2016, and then in 2017 we bought the ski property over near Mount Snow, and just kind of went from there, and we loved it, and it made mad money. And so I was like, well, let's buy another one. And so I was looking for ways to raise capital to buy another one. And for all and amongst all of this is going to sound crazy, but we had a convenience store too that I ran in addition to having like a 9 to 5 job. So we sold our convenience store and took all the money from that and started really expanding the short-term rental portfolio because it was just something I enjoyed more. I mean, the convenience store was okay, but it really was, my heart wasn't in it as much as the short-term rentals, and I just love short-term rentals. I like decorating them. I like buying real estate. I love all of the things I've learned being a real estate investor. So we've really expanded out from there. But you're no, when I first started, I really had no idea that in 2.5, 3 years, I would have 11 properties.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you're in different places, right? So was that the plan? And why did you choose to be in different places? Because it sounds like that complicates a business, right? If you're in Florida, you're in Vermont, you're in different places, you have to find people on the ground to help you manage, of course. So was that your vision, or did it just kind of come about that way?
It was my vision. we bought the property in Vermont. It was only an hour away from our house, and so our model is we learned. That was my first one. It's technically far away, so but it was still safe. It was only an hour, so if something really went to hell, I could be out there and fixing things. So I taught myself how to manage remotely through that property because I had to hire a cleaner. It's still an hour away, and even in the winter, it's longer than an hour to get there. So I had to figure out how to find like remote teams to do things. So I was trying to teach myself these skill sets. And then once we sold the store and we had some money that we had to invest, we went down to Mississippi and I basically applied like all of the same skills I had learned on that one that was only an hour away to Mississippi. Really the markets that I buy in, I have a feeling that's what you're going to ask me next is like, why did you pick all these different markets? So when I buy short-term rentals, I buy in places where short-term rentals have been around for a long time, and where the cities are getting money off of the short-term rentals. Either there's some kind of tax in place or it's advantageous for the local governments to have short-term rentals. I didn't always do that. Mississippi was kind of the first one I bought. I thought the city really liked short-term rentals, and I ran into a little bit of trouble with one of the properties I bought down there where I was told it was okay to short-term rent it. You just needed a variance. And when I went to city council for a variance, it was a mess. Like it was like almost like a public lynching that I went through to get that property to short-term rent it. And I wound up that I couldn't. Like the whole city was up in arms. Airbnb was involved. It was a real mess. So after that, I got much smarter and I went to Gatlinburg. And so if you look at Gatlinburg, the short-term rental market there has been around longer than Airbnb and VRBO. Same thing with Panama City Beach. And in both places, there are short-term rental taxes in place. Like the governments are making money off of the rentals. And so they don't want to see them go away anytime soon. They're very much pro short-term rental. So makes life a lot easier because you're not having to, in addition to, standing up the property and some financial risk involved with that, you're not also having to deal with the risk of the local regulatory authority telling you you can't do it.
Yeah, and it's also you're spreading the risk as well, right? Because if one market
Yep.
suddenly adopts a very restrictive short-term rental policy, then you're still good with all your other properties. So it definitely makes sense from that perspective. But how do you go about finding the people to help on the ground? Because that's mostly the biggest challenge for people that are in different places. Is to find reliable cleaners, reliable maintenance people to help with the on the ground management. So, how did you find those people?
Couple different sources. When I went to Biloxi, I stayed in an Airbnb and I contacted the host and found
Mm.
out that this person that I was staying with hosted all kinds of different properties there. And so I said, well, hey, I'm an investor coming into the area. Would you be willing to? I didn't want him to host for me, but I asked him if he would clean for me. And he said, sure. And so he had a ton of connections in with the local handymen and plumbers and things like that. The realtor. So when I went to Gatlinburg, I did the same thing. I stayed in an Airbnb and I figured out who the cleaning lady was because she was doing a great job and hired her on. She knew a lot of people in the Gatlinburg area, and so she helped me get connected with those folks. And then in Panama City, I really I knew nobody. I didn't even know a cleaner, and so for Panama City, I developed a pretty decent relationship with a realtor down there, and he has helped me not only get the property, but he referred me to some cleaners. And so you just start to kind of work it. Like if you get a good cleaner on your team, a lot of these cleaners in these markets live and die by referrals. So they almost have like their own like little black book of people to call who they're preferential to. And I've worked a lot of it that way too, just through the cleaners. I'll be like, hey, who you got that's a plumber or whatever. So, and I built up like a nice little Rolodex in Google and I sort them all by property. And so I kind of know like, oh, I've got to go get this fixed in Tennessee. Who should I call,
Yeah, and do you also have a check-in person, or do you have self-check-in options on all of your properties?
I use Wi-Fi locks on all my properties and everything is self-check-in.
What's your experience with those Wi-Fi logs? Are you happy with those?
I am. I love them. it's another way for you to know what's going on in your property. And it's another way for you to get control. I know in in Sturpa, we talk a lot about being able to know what's going on the ground on your property without being there. And you can do things like noise aware. But the other thing you can do is just lock. And you can also surveil. You can have cameras outside your property. But the lock is kind of handy because there's been a couple of instances with Airbnb where people have overstayed their welcome and they've told Airbnb that they didn't do it. And I can pull up the log where I can see where they actually access the lock. So it's pretty handy. And I think it's more secure too. A lot of people will hand out one code that's always valid on the door. And so as a guest, I would be concerned about someone coming back and having that code and getting in there when I was staying. With these locks, your code is only valid for the period of check-in to check-out and no other time. And so I have them go like an hour beyond the stated checkout time in case somebody's running a little late. But, after that, they can't get back in the property without calling you or you specifically granting them access. So I really like them. They're just very convenient. And it's, like I said, a good way to monitor what's going on in your property when you're not there.
Yeah, it's a great solution for sure. Would you mind sharing which one you've chosen?
Yeah, I use Remote Lock.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Remote
So they're
Lock is one
pretty
of the main
good.
brands. Yeah, and
Yeah, they're pretty good.
they have a partnership with Airbnb, right? They have a direct integration. So
They do and they don't. So one of the biggest thing that drives me nuts about them is they have an integration with Airbnb, but at the API level on the email, Airbnb won't allow them to send the guest code in the Airbnb message stream. So you wind up having to send it separately, and it becomes a massed email, and it goes to people's junk mail folders. So my one complaint about that whole service is that I try to automate and I don't want to have my hands in all this stuff all the time, but I do wind up having to send guest codes and copying them out of the email and into the Airbnb message stream because they're going into people's junk mail and they'll get to the door and they don't have the access code. But other than that, they've been really good.
that's interesting because I thought that was the point of the whole API integration to be able to do things like that, so that you don't have to, go outside of Airbnb to send those door codes.
Yeah, it'll generate it based on the information from the reservation, but they don't have access to the message stream in the API for some reason, so it doesn't show up in there. It's a whole separate email that always gets picked up in a spam filter and dumped in junk mail.
Right. So you get a lot of questions from your guests who reach out and say, "Hey, I didn't receive the code."
I don't because I know that this happens. So on all of these emails that come in, I just hop into the email and I copy the part about the door code and then I plop over to Airbnb and dump it in the message stream so they have
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But it's a pain. I mean, it's ridiculous when you think about the size of the operation I'm running. I have almost 300,000 in revenue on short-term rentals and I'm worrying about setting lock codes. I mean, that irks me to no end.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like you have your whole business pretty well set up. Your automation and everything seems like you have a good organizational structure behind it.
I think I've worked really hard. Basically, most of the stuff that you guys taught me in Sturpa about having automation and having that CEO mindset, and that's why I don't like those lock codes because a CEO shouldn't be sending lock codes to
Yeah,
anybody, right?
you're right.
I
That's what
push
we
hard
preach.
for automation. I push hard for automation and I push back against anything that requires me to do a lot of manual intervention. I just, I don't like if you start working with a cleaner and they're like, well, can you schedule it on my calendar? No, I can't. Like either you got to deal with the email that'll be automatically sent out or you got to get on Turnover B&B or one of those cleaning services. Everything is about automation for me because
Right.
again, I'm working full-time job too and all of
Yeah.
this. I
Yeah,
don't
I
have
mean
time.
that's incredible. You're able to manage 12 units while you have a full-time job as well. Is it your ambition to sort of have your Airbnb business be your main source of income?
Um, it's funny you should ask that. I don't really I would like it to get to that point. My ideal world is in like maybe 6 to 8 months. I'm gonna have to make a choice, right? Between either the 9 to 5 job, which is a pretty good paying job, great benefits, wonderful company, and to the point where my Airbnb portfolio is so big and I'm doing so well with it that it actually pays me better to go do the Airbnb thing. So my goal, this is going to sound crazy, but my goal is to get it so that I have that choice in front of me to make if I so choose, And so we're getting there. COVID slowed us down a bit. I'm not going to lie. I lost about 20 grand in 5 days because of all my cabins in Tennessee were fully booked for the summer and everything just evaporated. And the state of Vermont came out and said they basically told Airbnb to block all of our calendars until July 1st. So there have been no short-term rentals in Vermont whatsoever. So any kind of revenue, like we just did a bunch of renovations in the house. We added a couple of bathrooms so that some of our rooms, now every room of ours has a full bath in the house. It was before people used to have to share them. And so we were planning on those being very busy and renting them out for a little bit more this year. And there's been nobody because I can't rent. So it's put a little bit of a stick in our spokes, but we're going to be fine. Not worried about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 has kind of turned the world upside down. I think for anybody who's in the short-term rental niche, except for a very few people, we have a few people in our group actually in the Strapa, the Short-Term Rental Profit Academy. We have a few people that are actually in markets where the demand is crazy and they're expanding. But overall, how's it looking now? Do you see bookings picking up?
I do. It was kind of funny. So I just bought one in Panama City Beach and put it online last Thursday or Friday. So that one is very new. Um, the other one that I bought in Panama City Beach, put an offer and was accepted. We're closing on June 30th. So it's hard for me to say, like, because I don't have a ton of frame of reference, but I can share with you that those are booking up like crazy, and the rates are very high to stay in Panama City Beach in the middle of the summer. I mean, my lowest rate is $350 a night, which is pretty good, and it goes up to like 600 a night on like Fourth of July week. For the Gatlinburg market, it was funny. All the COVID-19 cancellations came in. I lost literally like I was kind of freaking out for 3 or 4 days because I lost $20,000 in bookings in like 5 days. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Right. And I've got more later in the podcast on how we actually cope with that. But it was kind of weird. It was kind of soft for a while. And then people started booking again. And I actually increased my rates. I'm renting them for more now than I was before because the demand is so high and people are coming back to Tennessee and Gatlinburg. And it's, the other thing that I use other criteria when I buy these things is it a drive to destination? And I've always, regardless of like COVID-19, I always wanted places that were drive to destinations because a lot of families can't afford plane tickets. But they can afford to get in the car and, spend 50, $60 in the tank of gas to get somewhere. So that's been really helpful too in this COVID-19 thing because now people are not flying. They're not getting on cruise ships anymore. And they're taking all that money. And I've had at least 3 different bookings where they told me in the booking message, hey, we couldn't take a cruise, but we're going to come and spend the week in Florida, for example. So that's been really, really helpful. And that's, when this whole COVID-19 thing struck, like I said, for 3 or 4 days, I was kind of scared. Well, then I turned off the news and I stopped listening to them. I started listening to you guys. I work with a personal development coach. I started listening to him and I was like, this is the time to like come out swinging and really start to grow. So we sold a unit in the middle of COVID-19 and bought 2 more. So to me, it's been a really good opportunity, and it's caused I think a lot of people to rethink their business models and are going to come out much better on the other side of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great because I always think that any situation there's something to grow from any situation, especially if it's a very challenging situation. I think we've all learned a lot of things during this crisis. I personally definitely have. My units are more in fly to destinations, so Unfortunately, I don't see.
Colombia.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see bookings picking up yet in my markets. But yeah, it's great to hear that you are seeing good bookings coming in, and definitely, I think the drive to destinations are that's probably going to be the place to be in the next couple of years. Um, you mentioned something that you want to comment on how you managed to get through the COVID-19 period.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned, I listened to a little book called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Gosh, it was probably 14 or 15 months ago. And the reason why I was listening to that book was because I was feeling I had all this money coming in from my short-term rentals and I had no money in my checking account. Like I was literally going into QuickBooks and trying to figure out the timing of all of the bills and am I going to have enough money on like the 11th of the month when all my mortgages go out to pay my mortgages. And I had a lot of money coming in. And I'm like, what, like there's something about this isn't right. And I wasn't paying myself anything out of the business. I had no reserves for insurances. I had nothing. And so I got Profit First, and it really struck a chord with me because I was tired of being scared running my business and just not knowing, and also feeling like kind of like a failure because I'm a pretty smart person. I've got a couple of different degrees in business. I should know how to do this stuff. So I got Profit First and I read it, and for folks who are not familiar, the whole idea with Profit First is you pay yourself first, then you pay your taxes, and then whatever you have left over is what you use to operate your business. And too many of us, I think, operate the business and don't thinking about paying ourselves or setting any profit aside maybe to reinvest in the business down the line. And particularly with short-term rentals, you can spend a lot of money setting up a short-term rental. And I love to use the example of the pillow, right? Like pillows are so cute and everybody loves them, but when someone is looking at your place, do you really think they're going to pay an extra $30 a night because you have this really cute pillow sitting on your couch? Probably not. So you can really blow a lot of money in short-term rentals very quickly. So what it focuses you to do is, since you have a limited amount of money left for your expenses, you start to really take a hard look at what your expenses are, when they are, and what is the ROI you're getting out of those expenses. Like I'll use an example. I hired a VA. For the longest time, I didn't want to hire one. But I hired one because I looked at it like, how much of my time is going to be saved by hiring that VA? What are the things that I can automate and get myself out of the business and put my mind on other things to grow? And so it seems kind of crazy, but it works really well when you start to look at your expenses and narrow them down and really prioritize. And it also helps you be more selective about the things that you tackle that are going to cost you money, like a website, right? Like I spent a lot of money in the last quarter of last year setting up a direct booking website. But it was a very calculated decision I made because I said, well, I'm going to be spending this money, but on the back end, I'm going to be saving all this money in Airbnb fees, hopefully down the line. So that's one part of the equation, right? Like learning how to control your expenses. But then there's this other fun little tool called YNAB. It stands for You Need a Budget. And so YNAB is a tool that helps you lay in a budget. The cool thing about YNAB though is it, and for a short-term rental business, is it allows you to proactively lay in all your expenses and really figure out like what your monthly outlay is. And you don't have to do it in a spreadsheet. It does it automatically for you, and it connects to your bank accounts and categorizes your expenses as you come in. As they come in. So for example, like, if you have like a monthly mortgage and stuff that goes out, you can put all that in there. You can set up a budget for it. For longer term expenses, for things like insurance and stuff, you're going to be making an insurance payment. Like if you own a property outright, you've got to pay the insurance once a year on it, right? Well, now there's no question that you're going to have the money because you set it up on like a 12-month payment schedule. If it's a $1,200, you're going to be setting aside $100 a month. And lo and behold, though, when the expense comes due, you have the money. So what this allows you to do, though, is you kind of build up a set of cash reserves. And what we did inside of YNAB for my business was, instead of saying, I'm going to, if my mortgage is $12,000 a year, I'm going to set $1,000 a month aside. We said, we're going to set aside the money to pay the mortgage over a 10-month period. So automatically you're creating 2 months of reserve. So by doing this with all of our mortgages and some of our other recurring expenses, we had about a 60-day reserve of cash just sitting there. So what did that mean? I could run my business for 60 days with no income coming in and survive. So it was really powerful. Like it took all of this worry and all this stuff with COVID-19 and helped me to be able to shift my mindset from, oh my God, I'm afraid, to, well, no, we're fine. Like, let's focus on how we can grow in this situation. So it was really powerful. And I think not enough people talk about the back end, the books on short-term rentals. Like, this is a big thing. It's really transformed my business. We also used QuickBooks, but QuickBooks is more for the taxes and accounting. It's not really a cash flow management tool like YNAB is.
Yeah, and thanks for that book recommendation. I've definitely heard about it. Profit First. I haven't read it yet, but after your story, I'm definitely going to read it because that sounds very familiar. I've been in that spot a few times in the last 10 years where
Yep.
I know I'm making money, but I'm not getting any richer. So, like, where's
Where's it going?
there's a disconnect, right? And it's
Yep.
all about what you talked about. It's all about planning. It's all about knowing what your expenses are, how much they are exactly. Because expenses, especially with like monthly subscriptions and all of that,
Yes.
it can really add up. And at some point, you just have no idea, right? So that's a good one. Who's the author of the book? Do you know?
Mike McAllowitz,
Okay, Mike
and
McAdams.
he's got a podcast too that's pretty good, where he interviews other businesses that have implemented the profit first methodology. He also has a book called Clockwork. So Clockwork kind of folds in real nice to what we try to teach in Stirpa, where you're behaving with like the COO mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in Clockwork, he teaches you to figure out what there's this thing called the Queen Bee rule and the QBR. You figure out what you're good at in your business, and then you set up automation around everything else to do with it. So you basically get yourself out of the things that you're not good at and automate or hire people to do these other functions for you. And it talks a ton about systems, and we talk a lot about systems in Stirpa too, having like systems set up so you're not so involved in everything all the time. So that's another book of his that I read. That's what got me to go hire the VA and start setting up a bunch of systems to do things, so I wouldn't have to do everything myself.
Yeah, and just to clarify, a VA is a virtual assistant. Is something that we always recommend in Strapa, or as it's the short-term rental profit academy. So within our it's our program, our online program, and within the program we like to call it Strapa, the abbreviation of that. But yeah, having a virtual assistant is incredible. I've worked with virtual assistants for almost close to a decade. I think it's one of
Oh,
the first
wow.
things that I started doing when I moved from my finance career to being an entrepreneur, or trying to be an entrepreneur is probably more accurate in the first couple of years. But I read what's it called, Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Work Week, and I'm pretty sure
Yep.
I learned about the concept of a virtual assistant in his book, and this is back in 2010, when having running a remote business with virtual assistants was kind of unheard of 10 years ago. That's how fast the world changes. Um, Sweet Karen, I really appreciate you providing all this advice, and I love your story as well. And we really appreciate you as an active member of our community, of course. And yeah, is there anything else, any final thoughts for the listener? I know you've listened to a lot of the podcasts yourself, so any final words before we wrap this up?
I would just tell people there's a lot of people that are scared right now that have short-term rentals. There's a lot of people getting out of the business because they have a very narrow view of, they're just looking at like what's in front of them. And I would just tell folks, don't feed into the hysteria and the panic that the media is putting out there. Broaden your horizons a little bit. Look at some other data. There's still a ton of opportunity in short-term rentals, and this is a wonderful business that you can have in addition to like having a full-time career, or I mean, you can make it a side hustle if you want. I just love short-term rentals, and I still think there's a ton of opportunity and a ton of ways to learn things about real estate that you can take and expand in other areas and go into other pieces of real estate too. So just don't be scared. Keep going.
Awesome advice. Thank you very much for sharing that. Sweet. So thanks, Karen. This was great. And for the listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.